Hello and welcome to the Owl's Nest, and welcome to one of my most anticipated videos to make, and that is going to be the top Overwatch League teams going into 2020. That's right, this is the Owl's Nest official power rankings, and we're doing it in a tier list format because I think that's the fairest way to evaluate these teams, because I think a number you can get into kind of nitpicky arguments, but if you overall group up where you see the teams, I think that's probably the best way to do it. So a few disclaimers right off the start is that this is 100% my opinion, and feel free to disagree with it. That's what I love doing about this channel. When you guys comment and saying, oh, I don't really see that, that's what I live for. So this is great. So thank you so much. And then second is the smoke alarm battery in my living room is going off, and the housing managers haven't taken care of it yet because they are not in. So if you guys hear that, just ignore it. We'll take care of it. But that's what that is. Anyway, let's go ahead and start with the number 20 team, and that is going to be the Boston Uprising. And I think everyone is kind of in consensus here that Boston does look like the worst team going into next year, and that's just because none of the additions they've made have been super inspiring, other than maybe Munbong, and I think that was just because the expediency that Boston had to offer him. While every other team was trialing him, Boston just gave him his money and he signed immediately, which I think is probably a good move for Boston because now they have a pretty strong support player. However, other than fusions, I don't know if I really see any players on Boston really being carrying for the next year, so I just have to put Boston at that 20 spot right now. I just don't see them better than any of these other teams. Next up is going to be the Los Angeles Valiant, and I'm going to put them at 19, and I think they're kind of in the same boat as Boston, as overall a pretty cheap approach as to building their roster, and it kind of shows. However, the reason I have them ahead is because I think the DPS lineup of KSF and Shaxx should put them a little bit above Boston. So I'm going to put the Valiant at 19. Next up at 18 is going to be the London Spitfire. And the reason I have the Spitfire above the Valiant is, once again, they kind of had the same approach as Boston and LA of just getting rid of their star players so they didn't have to pay them, and overall taking chances on new talent. However, I just don't feel very inspired by any of the signings that London has made this season, so I have to put them just one above the Valiant. I like Glister, which I think Glister, if you look at these three teams, is probably the best player amongst them, but I just can't put them over these two. Next up is going to be the Paris Eternal at 17. And the reason I have Paris above London is because at least the start of the season for Paris looked pretty good, and they finished overall middle of the lower pack, and I think that's about where I have them this year, but with the additions of some of the star players and coaches from Element Mystic, I think that could help Paris quite a bit next year, and that's why I have them just a little bit over London, but that's kind of a toss-up. I think those two could go either way. Next up is going to be at 16, I have the Dallas Fuel. And the reason I really have Dallas this low is just because I have a lack of expectations for this team after how they performed in both Season 1 and Season 2. Season 1, they only got hot at the end, and that was just because Mickey picked up Brigitte very quickly. And if you look at Season 2, they started hot on Goats, but just fell apart, with their only win in the second half of the season being a Stage 3 Washington Justice victory. So yeah, I just can't have Dallas higher than 16 right now. I do like their additions of Doha, Decay, and Gamsu, and especially with hero pools on the way, I think that'll be great because Decay has such a large hero pool. So I'm going to put Dallas at 16 for now. They could go up, but I have them a tier above the other teams. I just don't feel very confident in them. Next up at number 15 is going to be the Florida Mayhem. And I have Florida just a little bit above Dallas for about the same reasons, that I just have a hard time having expectations for this franchise just because of how badly they've performed in Season 1 and 2. But I like the additions they've signed from Runaway, and I think that Yaki could be great, Kuki could be great, but I'm still nervous about the core Florida Mayhem organization being strong, so I have to put them at 15 for now, but they could definitely exceed that. Next up at 14 is going to be the Washington Justice, and going into this year, the Justice kind of remind me of what a Season 1 to Season 2 Fuel was, of having a really great late stage after the season was already over, and The reason I have Washington this low, a couple YouTubers will have Washington higher, I just can't do it because I just don't like their tank line very much. Eli Vogt and Lolshus had great synergy when they played together, but they have not played on the Overwatch League stage yet, and their only alternative is Roar, who had kind of a meh year on the Gladiators, and now that he is going to be one of the main tank options for the Justice, he'll either have to break the synergy that Eli Vogt and Lolshus have by starting with one of them, or just kind of have to sit on the bench. So I'm confused by the moves that the Justice have made. So I have to have them at 14 for now, but that could go up. Next up is going to be the Chengdu Hunters at number 13, and the reason I have them there is because now that hero pools are a thing, we're going to see a lot more of chaotic Overwatch, which is Chengdu's main style, so I'm wondering if other teams adapt to play more like Chengdu, or if Chengdu overall strives in that because they've been playing that way for years. But I don't see a whole lot of huge potential for Chengdu, but Leave coming up should be great for them considering he was ineligible for most of last year, and I think him alongside Jinmu should be pretty exciting to watch. Next up at number 12, we have the Los Angeles Gladiators, and I'm going to have them finishing out this B tier. I like a lot of the moves the Gladiators have made, such as their tank line of OG and Space. However, their DPS is concerning to me, and if even one of them is off, I don't know how they're going to succeed next year. Especially if we look at how important DPS is in the upcoming meta, I just can't feel confident about having them higher than 12th. Next up at 11 and starting the A tier is going to be the Houston Outlaws. A lot of people are lower on the Outlaws than I am, and I can see why. There are legitimate complaints about them. But I just really like their new additions of Jexay, Repel, and Meko, and Hydration should be great there too. I just think the Outlaws have made a lot of moves this offseason that showed they're willing to compete, and I think they could. Next up at number 10 is going to be the Toronto Defiant. And Toronto is going up for me because of hero bans. I think Surefour will be a really good DPS because he's very flexible as well. And a lot of the moves Toronto have made look a lot better than the way they ended last year. Toronto had almost an epic collapse between stage 2, 3, and 4 after a really hot start in stage 1. So they got rid of most of their roster, and I kind of like the replacements. I have questions at tank for Nevix and Beast, and no backups. But I think that if they can work that out, I think Toronto should succeed. Next up at number 9 is going to be the Hangzhou Spark. And the big knock on the Spark this year is they didn't make a whole lot of moves in the offseason, other than getting some alternates at support, which I think should be pretty good for them. I think support is probably their weakest part of their team, but I think they could be strong once they get that worked out. Next up at number 8 is going to be the Guangzhou Charge, and the Charge finished last year really hot, qualifying for the play-ins and having a great stage 4, and I think that should continue into next year. I think Shu is a great flex support, and I think that a lot of the DPS line should be really good, and in hero pools I'm excited to see how they perform. Next up at number 7, I'm going to have the Seoul Dynasty sneak it into the top of the A tier. And I think Seoul has a lot of potential with Prophet and Gesture joining the team, as long as a few more free agents. But I just want to see a little bit more of how they perform and where their DPS is other than Prophet. But having Prophet, the most versatile DPS player in this hero pool Overwatch League that we're about to start living in, should be really exciting. So I'm going to put him at the top of A tier. Next up at number 6, I'm going to go with the Shanghai Dragons. I think the Dragons have also made some great moves. Their DPS group looks great, and they finished last year pretty hot with, of course, the Stage 3 Championship. And I think that number 6 is a good spot for them. I am also still questioning their tank line of Stand 1 and Void, but I think Void is pretty underrated, and Stand 1 could have potential, especially if he has all these great pieces around him. So I think number 6 is where I'm going to go with the Shanghai Dragons. Alrighty, and at number 5, I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Fusion. And I think the Fusion have a lot of potential, but also kind of the same criticisms as the Shanghai Dragons. They really don't have the main tank position quite worked out, with Sato being their only option, but their DPS group looks really good, even with Chipsa there. And I think the addition of Fury should be great. And also they'll still have Poco to play Sigma, even though Fury is not great on that hero. I think this should be a really good team and a potential title contender. So I'm going to have the Philadelphia Fusion at 5. Next up at number 4 is going to be the Atlanta Reign. A lot of people are really high on the Reign this year, and I can see why. They finished very hot at the end of last season, and with additions of Hawk, Gator, Sharp, and Edison, they look really strong going into next year, and I'm excited to see how they perform. I don't know if there's a whole lot of genuine critiques, maybe on their support line, but I think Atlanta should be really hot next year, so I'm going to put them at number 4. And at number 3, and finishing up this S tier, I'm going to go with the Vancouver Titans. A lot of people are lower on the Titans because of the release of Bumper and the signing of Fissure, and I think that's fair. We should be worried. However, I think people are forgetting just how good the rest of their roster was. They were undefeated for almost half, actually more than half of the Overwatch League. And though they are releasing Bumper, you could argue Bumper was maybe the worst player of that starting group. So now, though Fissure is definitely a question mark, I wish they signed a different main tank. I think that Vancouver is still really strong though, and if Fissure stays level-headed, I think they'll still be a championship contender. So I'm going the Vancouver Titans at number 3. Then at number 2, I'm going with the New York Excelsior. They are regular season studs, they barely drop games, and I think this might be the year they do it, with the additions of Hotbud, Off Tank, and Who Are You coming in for DPS, which I'm really excited to see how he performs. I think NYXL genuinely has a chance to win this year, as long as they don't choke. That's always been the knock on them, but if they can get over that and just get over that hurdle, I think New York could be the best team. However, obviously who I think is the best team is the San Francisco Shock. They haven't made many changes, but they haven't needed to. They just look really good going into next year, so I have them at the number 1 spot. So I'm going to display the list version of this in case you're curious how I arrange them, but this is where I kind of see the teams tier-wise, and I want to know your guys' thoughts, and comment your list. Who do you think I'm high on? Who do you think I'm low on? And I'm genuinely excited to compare, and I hope you guys all enjoy the regular season. We're starting soon. I'm going to have a video previewing this weekend in Overwatch League, and I'm excited, so I will talk to you guys later. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. There's going to be lots more content as the regular season goes on, and I'm super excited, guys, so I will talk to you guys later.